What if I told you that the only thing standing between you and financial abundance isn't your job, your education, your connections, or even the economy, but a simple shift in consciousness that takes less time than brushing your teeth? I know that sounds almost too simple to be true. You might be thinking about your current bank balance, the bills stacked on your desk, or the promotion that seems just out of reach. You've probably tried countless strategies, read the books, attended the seminars, repeated the affirmations until your voice grew hoarse. And yet here you are, still searching for that breakthrough that transforms everything. Has this ever happened to you? That moment when you feel like you're doing everything right, working harder than ever, but the financial freedom you desire remains frustratingly distant. Here's what most people never realize. You have never truly lacked money, not once in your entire life. What you've lacked is something far more fundamental: the consciousness of wealth itself. Think about that for a moment. The difference between where you are right now and where you want to be isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in awareness, in perception, in the very fabric of how you see yourself in relation to abundance. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, I'm about to share something with you that goes against everything you've been taught about creating wealth. Joseph Murphy discovered that the external world you perceive, every circumstance, every financial situation, every opportunity or obstacle, is nothing more than your own inner reality pushed outward into physical form. Your current financial situation is not happening to you. It's happening through you, created by patterns of thought and feeling you may not even be aware of. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because it means that poverty is not actually a lack of resources at all. It's a consciousness problem masquerading as a money problem. The kingdom of heaven, as the ancient texts tell us, exists within you right now, and that kingdom includes unlimited abundance. You're not separate from wealth, trying to pull it toward you from some distant place. You are the very source of it. Once you understand how to align your consciousness correctly, stay with me until the end, because Murphy revealed something even more remarkable. The distance between financial struggle and financial freedom can be crossed in exactly 30 seconds. Not 30 days, not 30 weeks, not 30 years of grinding effort, but 30 seconds of properly directed imagination. This isn't about working harder or smarter. It's about understanding that time and money operate on different principles than you've been taught. The transformation you seek doesn't require duration. It requires depth, intensity, and precision in a single powerful moment. Right now, you might be skeptical. Your rational mind is probably raising objections, pointing to all the evidence that contradicts this possibility. But what if that evidence is simply showing you the harvest of seeds you planted yesterday, last week, last year? Seeds you didn't even know you were planting? And what if today, in the next few minutes, you could learn to plant entirely different seeds that will bear fruit faster than you ever imagined possible? The question isn't whether this works. The question is, are you ready to discover how? Let me show you exactly why you're still experiencing the financial reality you have right now, even when you desperately want something different. Every single bill sitting on your desk, every debt notification that lands in your inbox, every moment of financial pressure you feel in your chest. These are not punishments from the universe, and they're not signs that you're doing something wrong. They're simply the harvest. They're the crops that have grown from seeds you planted days, weeks, months, or even years ago. And here's what most people never realize. Those seeds weren't planted consciously. You didn't sit down and deliberately choose to create financial struggle. Instead, you planted them unconsciously through worry, through anxious thoughts before sleep, through every casual statement of lack you made without even noticing. Think about the mental conversations you've been having with yourself. Every time you looked at your bank account with that sinking feeling and thought, money is so hard to come by, you planted a seed. Every time you said to a friend, I can't afford that, you planted another. Every night you lay awake turning numbers over in your mind, wondering how you'd make everything work. You were watering an entire garden of scarcity. This isn't about blame or guilt. It's about understanding the hidden mechanics of how your financial reality actually gets created. Your subconscious mind is like fertile soil, and it doesn't judge the quality of the seeds you drop into it. It simply grows whatever you plant with emotional intensity. Now, here's where this gets truly liberating, and I need you to really absorb this next revelation because it changes everything. The evidence you see around you right now, all those facts, all those numbers, all those circumstances that seem so solid and unchangeable, they're not lying to you. They're real, but they're old. This is the truth that Murphy discovered and that transforms everything. Your current financial situation is showing you yesterday's consciousness, not today's potential. It's like looking at a photograph from last year and believing that's who you are right now. The bills you're worried about today are the physical manifestation of thoughts and feelings you had in the past, before you understood how this actually works. This means something extraordinary. You are not trapped. You might feel trapped when you look at your circumstances, when you check your account balance, when you see the mountain of obligations in front of you. But those circumstances are simply showing you outdated information. They're reflecting a version of your consciousness that no longer needs to exist. Right now, in this very moment, you have the power to plant entirely different seeds, and those new seeds can begin growing immediately, pushing through the soil faster than you think possible. The transformation doesn't require you to somehow erase your current circumstances through force of will or endless positive thinking. It requires something far simpler and far more powerful. If this content is speaking to you, make sure you subscribe so you can continue learning these deeper principles with me. I'm constantly exploring new dimensions of how consciousness creates reality, and I want you here for all of it. The journey from financial struggle to financial freedom isn't about fighting against your current reality or pretending it doesn't exist. It's about understanding that reality is far more fluid than you've been taught to believe. Your consciousness is not a passive observer of your financial life. It's the active creator of it. And once you truly grasp this, once you feel the impact of this, understanding in your bones, everything shifts. The decisions you make, the thoughts you think, the feelings you cultivate, all of these become intentional tools rather than unconscious habits. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of your experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because understanding that your current evidence is old is just the beginning. What matters most is learning exactly how to plant those new seeds correctly, with the precision and power that makes them grow at an accelerated rate. There's a specific technique, a method that takes mere seconds, but carries the force of transformation that most people spend years searching for. This technique works with the natural laws of consciousness, not against them. Write in the comments, I'm ready to plant new seeds, and let me know this resonates with where you are right now. What I'm about to reveal will completely change how you view those precious moments before you fall asleep each night. Most people have no idea that the most powerful creative period of their entire day happens in those drowsy minutes when they're drifting off. This is the window when your conscious mind relaxes its grip, when your critical thinking fades, and when the door to your subconscious swings wide open. And here's what's been happening without your awareness. You've been using this sacred time to unconsciously program tomorrow's struggles. Every night when you lay your head, On the pillow with financial worries swirling through your mind, you're literally instructing your subconscious to create more of what you don't want. Think about your typical night. You're exhausted from the day's demands, and as you begin to relax, what thoughts drift through your awareness? For most people, it's a mental replay of everything that went wrong, every bill that needs paying, every financial pressure that weighs on them. You might think to yourself, I can't keep doing this, or money is so tight, or how am I going to make this work? These aren't just passive thoughts disappearing into the void. They're active instructions being downloaded directly into the most receptive, most creative part of your mind. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't question whether these thoughts are helpful or harmful. It simply accepts them as commands and begins working overnight to make them your reality. This discovery represents one of the most profound revelations about human consciousness. We've been creating our financial struggles not through our actions during the day, but through our mental habits in those unguarded moments before sleep. The subconscious is like a faithful servant that never sleeps, never questions, never judges. It takes whatever you impress upon it with feeling and begins immediately to outpicture it in your external world. When you drift off to sleep, feeling anxious about money, you're essentially placing an order with the universe for more situations that will make you feel anxious about money. The impact of this unconscious programming has been shaping your financial journey for years, possibly your entire life. But here's the transformation that changes everything. Once you understand this mechanism, you can take conscious control of it. Right now, tonight, before you go to sleep, you have the power to plant entirely different seeds. Instead of unconsciously sowing worry and lack, you can deliberately plant seeds of abundance and prosperity. This isn't about fighting your current circumstances or trying to convince yourself of something you don't believe. It's about understanding that your subconscious mind is most receptive to new impressions during that twilight state between waking and sleeping, and you can use that receptivity intentionally. The hidden truth that Joseph Murphy discovered is that you don't need months or years for this to work. The harvest from properly planted seeds can manifest faster than your rational mind thinks possible. Time doesn't work the way you've been taught when it comes to consciousness and creation. A seed planted with the right technique, with genuine feeling and proper understanding, can begin showing results within days, sometimes even sooner. This goes against everything you've learned about hard work and delayed gratification, but the evidence is undeniable when you see it in your own life. The key isn't duration or repetition for its own saga. It's precision, it's depth, it's planting the right seed in the right way at the right moment. Your entire financial future can shift based on what you do with those few minutes before sleep tonight. Not because of some magical thinking, but because you're finally working with the natural laws of consciousness instead of against them. The decisions you make about what to feel and think as you drift off tonight will determine what grows in your life tomorrow. This is the mechanics behind the scenes of every success story, every unexpected breakthrough, every moment when someone's financial reality transformed, seemingly overnight. Drop a comment below saying, "Tonight I plant differently," if you're ready to take control of this process. Now, let me tell you why you're so exhausted. It's not because you haven't tried hard enough. I know you've been trying. You've been working overtime, taking on extra projects, reading the success books, attending the seminars, repeating affirmations in the mirror every morning. You've been grinding, hustling, pushing yourself to the limit, and yet the financial breakthrough keeps eluding you, and the exhaustion keeps building. But here's what nobody tells you. That exhaustion isn't coming from a lack of effort. It's coming from the fact that you've been working in completely the wrong direction this entire time. The traditional approach to creating wealth is fundamentally backwards. We've been taught to attack our circumstances directly, to try to force the external world to bend to our will through sheer effort and determination. Get another degree, work longer hours, network more aggressively, learn new skills, switch careers, start a side business. These aren't bad things in themselves, but when you're trying to use them to create change from the outside in, you're working against the natural law of how reality actually operates. It's like trying to change your reflection in a mirror by reaching into the mirror itself. You can wipe the glass, you can touch the surface, you can spend hours trying to manipulate that reflection, but nothing fundamental will shift until you change what's standing in front of the mirror. This is the hidden truth behind why so many people work incredibly hard their entire lives and still struggle financially, while others seem to attract abundance effortlessly. The difference isn't intelligence, isn't connections, isn't even opportunity. The difference is understanding where change actually originates. Every circumstance you see in your external world is a shadow. It's an effect, not a cause. Your bank account balance is a shadow. Your job title is a shadow. The opportunities that come your way or don't come your way are shadows. They're all being cast by something deeper, something internal, something that most people never learn to access or adjust. What you've been doing is trying to rearrange the furniture of your life, when what's actually needed is a complete redesign of the architecture. You've been moving things around on the surface, switching jobs, cutting expenses, looking for better opportunities, while the underlying structure of your consciousness remains unchanged, and so the same patterns keep repeating because the blueprint hasn't been altered. You might get temporary improvements, brief moments of relief, but then you find yourself back in familiar territory because the fundamental design hasn't shifted. The journey you've been on has been exhausting precisely because you've been trying to create an internal transformation through external manipulation, and it simply doesn't work that way. The revelation that changes everything is this: your circumstances are not creating your consciousness. Your consciousness is creating your circumstances. The external world is responsive, not causative. It's a mirror, a projection, a shadow play of what's happening within you. When you try to change your financial situation by manipulating external factors alone, you're attempting to rearrange shadows while leaving the light source exactly where it is. You might create temporary shifts, but the shadows will always reform according to the position and quality of the light. The real work, the work that creates lasting transformation, happens when you adjust the light source itself. Your own consciousness, your own assumptions, your own inner convictions about what's possible for you. This is why some people can lose everything and rebuild quickly, while others struggle for decades, despite working twice as hard. The person who understands consciousness as the source can recreate abundance even after total loss because their internal architecture is solid. The person who doesn't understand this keeps rebuilding the same structure over and over, wondering why it keeps collapsing. The impact of this understanding cannot be overstated. It's the difference between a lifetime of struggle and a life of flow, between exhausting effort and effortless manifestation. The question isn't whether you're capable of working hard. You've already proven that. The question is whether you're ready to redirect that energy toward the actual source of change, rather than continuing to battle with the shadows. Once you understand that every external circumstance is just a reflection of an internal state, you stop fighting the world and start transforming yourself. And when you transform yourself, the world has no choice but to transform around you. Type, "I'm ready to change the source," if this is landing for you right now. So let me give you the actual tool that makes this transformation possible. It's called the SNAP technique. And before you roll your eyes thinking this is just another acronym to memorize, understand that this represents something Joseph Murphy spent decades refining. SNAP stands for Subconscious Now Assumption Practice, and it's specifically designed to work with the natural laws we've been discussing rather than against them. This isn't about adding more complexity to your life or spending hours in meditation or visualization. In fact, the entire technique takes 30 seconds. Yes, 30 seconds. And those 30 seconds, when done correctly, carry more transformative power than 30 years of the traditional approach. What makes this so revolutionary is its simplicity. There's nothing complicated about it, nothing that requires special training or abilities. A child could understand and apply this technique, and yet it's powerful enough to completely restructure your financial reality, regardless of how dire your current circumstances appear. The beauty of Snap is that it works directly with that threshold state we discussed earlier, that precious window between waking and sleeping when your subconscious is most receptive. It gives you a specific, repeatable process for planting exactly the right seed in exactly the right way at exactly the right moment. No guessing, no wondering if you're doing it correctly, no abstract concepts that leave you confused about implementation. But here's where most people stumble, and this is the hidden ingredient that determines whether this technique produces miraculous results or nothing at all. It's not about how long you practice. It's not about how many times you repeat something. It's not even about how vividly you can visualize. The missing ingredient that makes the difference between success and failure is depth of feeling. This is what separates those who transform their lives using these principles from those who try the same techniques and see no results. You can speak affirmations for hours, you can create vision boards, you can visualize until your mind goes numb. But if there's no genuine feeling behind it, you're just moving air. You're creating empty forms without substance. Feeling is the secret that activates everything. Think about it this way. Your subconscious mind doesn't respond to words or images alone. It responds to the emotional signature, the feeling tone that accompanies your thoughts. When you imagine having money but feel poor while doing it, which message do you think your subconscious receives? Not the image of wealth, but the feeling of poverty. This is why people can repeat positive affirmations all day long and still remain stuck. They're saying one thing with their words while feeling something completely different in their emotional body. The subconscious always responds to the feeling, not the words. Always. One single moment of genuine feeling where you truly inhabit the state of already having what you desire accomplishes more than 1,000 hours of hollow repetition. This explains the mystery of why some people seem to manifest things effortlessly while others struggle, despite doing all the right things. The difference isn't in the technique itself, but in the emotional authenticity brought to it. When you can capture for just 30 seconds the actual feeling of financial relief, of abundance, of having your needs met and exceeded, that's when the magic happens. That's when the subconscious receives a clear, undiluted instruction and begins immediately to reorganize your external reality to match that internal state. If this video opened something up for you, hit that like button. It's a small gesture that helps this message reach people who are searching for exactly what you just discovered. The impact of understanding. This cannot be overstated because it means you don't need more time, you need more depth. You don't need to add hours to your daily practice. You need to add authenticity to your feeling. Most people are trying to create transformation through quantity, when what's actually required is quality. They're repeating affirmations mechanically while their heart remains unconvinced. They're visualizing success while their gut churns with doubt. And then they wonder why nothing changes. The decision to engage with genuine feeling rather than mechanical repetition is the turning point where everything shifts. Comment, feeling is my power, if you're beginning to see why this ingredient has been missing from your practice. Now, I want you to hear something that might challenge everything you believe about limitations. You might be thinking right now that this sounds wonderful in theory, but you have specific circumstances that make it different for you. Maybe you're thinking, I'm too old to start over, or I don't have the right education, or I don't know the right people. Maybe you're convinced that your particular situation is the exception, that the obstacles in your path are just too concrete, too real, too insurmountable for any technique to overcome. Let me be absolutely clear about this. Your circumstances have zero power over this law. None. Age doesn't matter. Education doesn't matter. Your network or lack of one doesn't matter. Your current employment status, your credit score, your past failures, the economy, your location. None of these external factors have the power to prevent this law from working in your life. This isn't motivational cheerleading or positive thinking fluff. This is the actual mechanics of how consciousness operates. When you truly understand and apply this law, you're working at a level that transcends all those surface conditions. You're accessing the creative power that existed before any of those circumstances came into being, the same power that can dissolve them and replace them with something entirely different. But I understand that you might need proof, something concrete that shows this isn't just theoretical. So let me share with you the journey of a woman who had every reason to give up, every justification to believe she was too far gone for any transformation to help. She was 55 years old, completely unemployed, with a car that was literally falling apart beneath her. She was behind on her rent and facing eviction. She had no proper clothes to wear to job interviews, even if she could get them. Her bank account was nearly empty. She had no family support, no safety net, no obvious path forward. By every conventional measure, her situation was hopeless. The world would look at her circumstances and say, "It's too late, you're too old, you don't have the resources, there's no way out." But she had learned about this technique, and in her desperation, she decided to apply it with complete commitment. She understood that she didn't need to figure out how the money would come, or who would provide it, or what sequence of events would need to unfold. Her only job was to assume the feeling of having her needs met, to plant that seed with genuine emotion before sleep each night. For 2 months she practiced this consistently. During those 2 months, her external circumstances remained difficult. The bills kept coming, the pressure didn't ease, but something was growing beneath the surface. Invisible, but real. A shift in consciousness that was already beginning to reorganize her reality. Then something happened that she could never have predicted or planned. An old acquaintance she hadn't seen in months mentioned casually that he was traveling to New York on business. It seemed like meaningless small talk at the time, but 1 month later, that same man appeared at her door, holding an envelope containing a certified check for $2,500. The story behind it seemed impossible. A friend from 25 years ago, someone she hadn't heard from in decades, had become wealthy and decided to share his fortune with her. He asked for nothing in return. He simply wanted to help. But the transformation didn't stop there. For the next 2 years, she received monthly checks that more than covered her needs. And then legal documents arrived establishing that this monthly income would continue for the rest of her natural life. This wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. This was the law in operation, proving that when you change your consciousness, reality must rearrange itself to match. The hidden mechanics behind the scenes involved no effort on her part to make it happen, no networking, no job applications, no strategic planning. Just the consistent practice of feeling the wish fulfilled for 30 seconds before sleep. The impact of her decision to trust this process, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, created a complete reversal of her circumstances. From facing homelessness to receiving lifetime financial security, all because she understood that her circumstances had no power over the law. Right Circumstances don't define me if you're ready to move beyond your current limitations. Let me tell you about someone who looked successful from the outside, but felt completely trapped on the inside. There was a bank executive, a man who wore expensive suits, carried himself with dignity, commanded respect in his position. 2. Everyone around him he had made it. He had security, a respectable title, a comfortable lifestyle. But behind that polished exterior, he was suffocating. He had reached a ceiling in his salary, and despite his competence and years of dedication, his superiors had made it clear that no major advancement was possible. The structure of the organization simply wouldn't allow it. If he wanted more, he would need to leave and start over somewhere else, with no guarantees. This situation haunted him. He had children approaching college age, and he knew his current income couldn't carry them through the education they deserved. He had worked hard his entire life, followed all the rules, done everything that society told him would lead to success. And yet here he was, boxed in by circumstances that seemed completely beyond his control. The frustration wasn't just about money. It was about feeling powerless, about believing that external forces were dictating the limits of his life. He lay, awake at night, running the numbers, looking for solutions that didn't exist, feeling the weight of responsibilities he couldn't meet, pressing down on his chest. When he first heard about this approach to transformation, he was deeply skeptical. It sounded too simple, too far removed from the practical realities of career advancement and salary negotiations. But his desperation was greater than his doubt, so he decided to test it. Joseph Murphy explained something to him that completely reframed his entire understanding of his situation. The bank wasn't blocking his advancement. His superiors weren't the problem. The organizational structure wasn't the obstacle. His own consciousness was creating the limitation, and the external circumstances were simply mirroring back to him his internal assumptions about what was possible for him. This is one of the most profound revelations you can have about how reality works. Your outer world is a perfect mirror reflecting your inner world. Not sometimes, not occasionally, always. Every circumstance you encounter, every person who shows up in your life, every opportunity that appears or doesn't appear, all of it is showing you the face you're presenting from within. When this executive looked at his stagnant career, he was actually looking at his own internal stagnation, his own unconscious belief that he had reached his limit. The bank's policies weren't trapping him. His consciousness was, and the bank's policies were, simply the form that his internal limitation took in physical reality. Most people never grasp this because it's easier to blame external circumstances than to examine internal assumptions. It's more comfortable to point at the economy, the boss, the system, the lack of opportunities, than to acknowledge that these external factors are reflections of something happening within. But once you understand this mirror principle, everything changes. You stop fighting the world and start transforming yourself. You realize that trying to force external circumstances to change while leaving your consciousness unchanged is like getting angry at your reflection in a mirror and trying to fix it by wiping the glass. The reflection will never change until you change what's standing in front of the mirror. The executive began applying the technique, and here's what's remarkable. He didn't need to network differently, didn't need to send out applications, didn't need to manipulate any external circumstances. He simply changed his internal state. Every night before sleep, he assumed the feeling of having already secured his dream position, managing investment funds for a prestigious foundation. He felt the satisfaction, the relief, the sense of arrival. He didn't worry about how it would happen or who would make it possible. He just held the feeling of the wish fulfilled for those crucial 30 seconds before drifting off. And as his internal state shifted, as his consciousness transformed, the external mirror had no choice but to reflect something different back to him. The journey from limitation to breakthrough happened not through external maneuvering, but through internal transformation. This is the hidden truth that changes everything once you really grasp it. Drop "I am the mirror" in the comments if this principle is becoming clear to you. So, Murphy gave the executive a very specific instruction, and I want you to pay close attention because this is where most people make a critical mistake that sabotages their entire practice. He told him to stop completely trying to figure out how the transformation would happen. Stop trying to map the route. Stop analyzing who he would need to meet, what connections he would need to make, what steps he would need to take. The how is not your business. Your only business is to assume the state of being the person who already has what you desire. This goes against every instinct you've been trained to follow. Your logical mind wants to plan, to strategize, to figure out the pathway from here to there, but that's exactly the mindset that keeps you trapped. When you try to figure out the how, you're operating from the consciousness of not having. You're standing in lack, looking at the gap between where you are and where you want to be, trying to build a bridge across it. But the law doesn't work through bridges. It works through transformation of state. The executive's dream was to manage investment funds for a great foundation or university, something completely outside his current world. He had no contacts in that sphere, no pathway visible to him, no logical way to make it happen. And that's exactly why Murphy told him to forget about all of that. Your job is not to know the how. Your job is to assume the feeling of fulfillment. Each night, as the executive prepared for sleep, he followed a very precise practice. He would lie down, relax his body completely, and then, as he began to feel that drowsy, floating sensation, he would imagine something specific. Not the interviews, not the negotiations, not the process of getting the position. He imagined lying in bed at the end of a magnificent day when everything had already been finalized. He felt himself resting there, filled with satisfaction, with relief, with deep contentment, knowing that today he had secured exactly the position he desired. The agreement was done. The decision was made. It was finished. And now he could simply rest in the peace of having received. This distinction is absolutely crucial to understand. He wasn't imagining the future process of getting there. He wasn't visualizing himself someday receiving an offer. He was feeling the present moment of having already received it, at the end of the day when it became real. Just 30 seconds of that feeling, saturated with the emotional reality of fulfillment, planted deeply in that receptive pre-sleep state. That's all, 30 seconds. But those 30 seconds contained complete conviction, genuine feeling, the actual sensation of wish fulfilled. No doubt crept in during those moments because he was too drowsy for the critical mind to interfere. He simply felt what it would feel like to have this be done, to have it be accomplished, to finally be able to relax into the reality of his desire. The impact of this seemingly small practice cannot be measured by its brevity. Remember, it's not about duration. It's about depth, about authenticity, about truly inhabiting that state, even if only for a moment. The subconscious doesn't need long exposure to receive an impression. It needs genuine exposure. When the feeling is real, when the assumption is complete, even for seconds, the seed is planted with full potency. And once planted, the subconscious begins its work immediately, operating behind the scenes of your conscious awareness, rearranging circumstances, influencing minds, orchestrating events you could never consciously plan. Night after night, the executive did this. December passed, January passed. His external circumstances showed no change. His salary remained the same. His position remained the same. Nothing visible was happening, but beneath the surface, in the invisible realm where all manifestation originates, the wheels were turning. His consciousness was shifting, and reality was preparing to catch up to that shift. The transformation was already in motion, even though the evidence hadn't yet appeared. This is where faith comes in, not blind faith, but faith in the law, understanding that the seed must grow in darkness before it breaks through into light. Comment, I trust the unseen process, if you're understanding how this works beneath the surface. Now here's something that might surprise you about this entire process. The executive didn't truly believe it would work. Not at first. He thought the whole thing sounded absurd, frankly. Managing investment funds for a prestigious foundation when he had no connections, no pathway, no reason to think such an opportunity would ever present itself. It seemed like fantasy. But here's the liberating truth that changes everything. You don't need to believe for this to work. The law of assumption operates whether you believe in it or not, just like gravity pulls you toward the earth, whether you believe in gravity or not. Your skepticism doesn't prevent the law from functioning. Your doubt doesn't cancel its operation. You simply need to do and practice. This removes an enormous burden that stops most people before they even begin. They think, I can't make this work because I don't really believe it, and so they never try. But belief is not a prerequisite. Application is. The executive applied the technique despite his doubt. He did it because he had nothing to lose and everything to gain. He followed the instructions precisely, night after night, even when his rational mind was whispering that this was pointless. And his willingness to do the work despite his skepticism is exactly what allowed the transformation to occur. The subconscious doesn't require your conscious mind's permission or approval. It simply responds to the impressions you give it with feeling. Then, in early February, something extraordinary happened, something that his conscious mind could never have orchestrated, could never have predicted, could never have planned. A director from one of the wealthiest foundations in the entire world approached him. Not the other way around. The executive didn't send an application. He didn't attend networking events hoping to make connections. He didn't even know anyone connected to this foundation. Yet this director sought him out specifically, explaining that he had been observing the executive's work for some time, admiring his integrity and competence, and believed that bringing him on to manage investments would be an excellent decision for the foundation. The executive was stunned. The position being offered was precisely what he had been imagining every night before sleep. The work, the prestige, the financial compensation, the sense of purpose, everything aligned perfectly with the state he had been assuming in those drowsy pre-sleep moments. But what stunned him even more was that he had done nothing consciously to make this happen. There was no visible bridge between his nightly practice and this offer appearing in his life. The connection existed entirely in the invisible realm, in the reorganization of consciousness that then rippled out into physical circumstances. This is how the law actually works in practice. The channels through which your manifestation arrives are often completely unexpected, involving people you've never met, circumstances you couldn't have arranged, timing you couldn't have orchestrated. The subconscious mind has access to infinite pathways, infinite connections, infinite possibilities that your conscious mind cannot perceive. When you try to figure out the how, you limit yourself to the narrow range of possibilities your conscious mind can imagine. But when you simply assume the state and let the how take care of itself, you open yourself to solutions coming from directions you never would have considered. The director later explained that something had prompted him to reach out at exactly that time, as if guided by an invisible hand. He couldn't fully articulate why he felt so compelled to bring the executive into the foundation, but the impulse was undeniable. What he experienced as his own spontaneous decision was actually the outworking of the law, the reflection of the executive's changed consciousness appearing in another person's thoughts and actions. This is the hidden mechanics behind every seemingly miraculous transformation. Someone's internal shift creating external movement in ways that appear magical but are actually lawful. The journey from trapped bank employee to fulfilling his ultimate career dream took just 2 months of consistent practice, 2 months of 30-second sessions before sleep. And the impact of that transformation extended far beyond just the job itself. The executive's entire relationship with possibility changed. He now understood experientially that consciousness creates circumstances, not the other way around. Type, consciousness creates circumstances if this story is showing you what's truly possible. But what if you need results faster? What if you're in a situation where waiting 2 months feels impossible? Let me share with you a story that demonstrates just how rapidly this law can work when applied correctly. A mother traveled across the country to visit her daughter in San Francisco, expecting to find the cheerful young woman she knew. Instead, she found her daughter in absolute anguish. The girl's face was drawn with worry, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. Something terrible was weighing on her, and when she finally broke down and told her, "Mother, what was wrong?" the urgency was palpable. She needed $3,000 immediately, not in a few weeks when she could save up, not even next week, now. There was a situation that demanded this money with no time to plan, no time to borrow, no time to figure out conventional solutions. The mother's heart broke seeing her daughter's distress, but she knew she couldn't produce that kind of money quickly. Her own funds were tied up in ways that couldn't be easily liquidated. And even if she could somehow scrape it together, she knew her daughter would never accept it. The girl was proud, independent, determined to make her own way in the world. She would see a loan from her mother as charity, as failure, as something that violated her sense of self-reliance. The situation seemed impossible from every angle, but then the daughter said something remarkable. She looked at her mother and said, "Help me in your way." What did she mean by that? She meant through imagination. She meant through the principles Joseph Murphy had taught her mother in his lectures. The mother had shared these teachings with her daughter before, and now in this moment of desperation, the daughter was willing to try something she might have dismissed under different circumstances. The mother agreed immediately, but she made one condition. They would do this together. 2 minds focused on the same objective would carry more power than one. This wasn't just theory. When multiple consciousnesses align around a single intention, the impact multiplies exponentially. They sat together and began their imaginative work, but notice carefully what they didn't do. They didn't try to visualize specific people writing specific checks. They didn't imagine exactly who would give them the money or precisely how it would arrive. They didn't limit the channels through which the abundance could flow. Instead, they created a feeling, a state, an experience that was open to infinite possibilities. They imagined money flooding toward the daughter from everywhere, from every direction, from every corner of the world. Money coming from the north and the south, from the east and the west. They saw her standing in a sea of abundance, surrounded by more than enough, with plenty flowing in from sources they couldn't name and didn't need to know. This is crucial. When you try to specify exactly how your manifestation must arrive, you limit the infinite intelligence of the subconscious to the narrow possibilities your conscious mind can conceive. But when you focus on the end result, on the feeling of having received and leave the channels open, you allow the law to work through whatever pathway is most efficient. The feeling they cultivated together wasn't desperate grasping. It wasn't anxious hoping. It was celebration, as if the money had already arrived, and they were giving thanks. They felt joy, relief, gratitude for all the unseen forces and people who were involved in bringing this blessing. They held this feeling completely, saturating themselves with the reality of abundance received, just moments at a time, perhaps 30 seconds, perhaps a minute, but feeling it as absolutely real. The mother returned home to the East Coast shortly after, and what happened next reveals the hidden machinery behind the scenes of manifestation, the way consciousness moves through the world, touching people, inspiring decisions, creating what looks like coincidence, but is actually law in operation. Leave a comment saying, "Two minds, one vision," if you're seeing how alignment amplifies power. Within just days, something remarkable happened that perfectly illustrates how this law operates through the most unexpected channels. The mother's own mother, the daughter's grandmother, a lovely woman of 91 years old, still sharp and full of life, called urgently. She needed to see her daughter immediately. It couldn't wait. When the mother arrived, wondering what could possibly be so urgent, the grandmother handed her a check for $3,000 made out not to her, but to her granddaughter in San Francisco. And that wasn't all. There were 3 additional checks totaling $1,500 for the great-grandchildren. The mother stood there stunned, holding these checks in her trembling hands, knowing that her elderly mother had absolutely no knowledge of the crisis, no awareness that her granddaughter was in desperate need of exactly this amount. So what prompted this sudden generosity? The grandmother explained that she had been moved by a powerful impulse, something she couldn't fully articulate but felt compelled to follow. She had suddenly decided, seemingly out of nowhere, that she wanted to give what she had in cash to those she loved while she was still alive to witness their joy. She didn't want to wait until she was gone. She wanted to see them blessed now, wanted to experience the happiness of giving while she could still participate in it. To her, this felt like her own spontaneous decision, a natural desire that arose from within her own heart. But what was really happening? Her consciousness was being moved by the imaginative work her daughter and granddaughter had done together. The feeling of abundance they had cultivated, the state of gratitude and celebration they had assumed, created ripples in the larger consciousness that connects all minds. This is the hidden truth that most people never grasp about manifestation. The grandmother wasn't consciously trying to solve a problem she didn't know existed. She experienced her decision as completely her own, arising from her own spontaneous generosity. But decisions are never truly spontaneous. They're the outer expression of inner states, sometimes our own states, sometimes the states that others hold concerning us. When you change your consciousness about a situation, when you assume with feeling that your need is met, that assumption doesn't just affect you. It moves through the invisible web of consciousness that connects all human minds, touching people, inspiring thoughts, creating impulses that feel natural and spontaneous to those who experience them, but are actually the outworking of the law. The impact of understanding this principle transforms how you approach every challenge. You stop trying to manipulate specific people or engineer specific outcomes. You stop worrying about who has the resources or who might help you. Instead, you focus entirely on assuming the state of wish fulfilled, feeling the joy of having received and trusting that the law will move whoever needs to be moved, inspire whoever needs to be inspired, arrange whatever needs to be arranged. The grandmother giving exactly $3,000 plus extra wasn't coincidence. It was consciousness in motion, the invisible architecture of reality responding to a clear assumption held with genuine feeling. The journey from desperate need to fulfilled abundance took only days because the quality of feeling was right. They didn't grasp with desperation, they celebrated with certainty. And that certainty, that assumption of already having received, created the conditions for rapid manifestation through a channel no one could have predicted. Right? The law moves through everyone, if you're beginning to see how this invisible web operates. Now let me show you exactly why this principle of not needing to know the source is so crucial to making this work. Your conscious mind wants to solve the puzzle. It wants to figure out who will give you the money, which opportunity will present itself, what sequence of events will unfold. But every moment you spend trying to map the pathway, you're actually limiting the infinite intelligence that's trying to work on your behalf. The subconscious mind is connected to every other mind in existence through what we might call the larger consciousness. It has access to possibilities you cannot perceive, channels you've never considered, people you've never met. When you release the need to know the how and simply focus on the feeling of having received, you open yourself to solutions coming from directions your rational mind would never have imagined. This is the hidden architecture of reality that most people never discover. You are not isolated. Your consciousness doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's an invisible network connecting all minds, and when you hold a clear assumption with genuine feeling, that assumption reverberates through this network, touching people, inspiring decisions, creating movements that appear random but are actually lawful. The grandmother didn't consciously know about the need, yet she was moved to fulfill it precisely. The foundation director didn't realize he was responding to the executive's inner work, yet he reached out at exactly the right time. This is how the law operates behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances through the movements of consciousness itself. But what if you're someone who struggles with visualization? What if you've tried to picture things in your mind and found only darkness or vague, unconvincing images? Let me tell you about a woman whose journey will show you that visualization ability is not what makes this work. She was 55 years old, completely unemployed, with a car that was literally falling apart. She was behind on her rent and facing eviction. She had no proper clothes to wear, even if she could secure an interview. Her bank account was nearly empty, and she had no family or friends who could help. By every measure, she was in a desperate situation with no obvious way forward. She had learned about Murphy's teachings and understood the principles intellectually, but when she tried to apply them, she hit a wall. She would lie down at night and attempt to visualize each thing she needed: the new car, the professional clothes, the beautiful apartment with rent fully paid, the fulfilling job. But the list of needs was so overwhelming that she exhausted herself with anxiety before she could even complete one visualization session. Her imagination kept collapsing under the weight of her circumstances. The images would form briefly and then dissolve into worry. She felt like she was failing at the very technique that was supposed to save her. But then she remembered something crucial that Murphy had taught about capturing a single feeling that could encompass all desires. She stopped trying to visualize specific things and instead discovered something brilliantly simple. As she drifted towards sleep, she began to feel simply and purely that something wonderful was happening to her right now. Not tomorrow, not someday when things improved. Right now. The transformation in her approach came from releasing the need for detailed pictures and focusing entirely on the feeling tone. She wasn't trying to see anything specific. She was just allowing herself to feel the way she would feel if the most wonderful news of her life had just arrived. Comment feeling over seeing if this is opening a new possibility for you. The phrase she chose was beautifully simple. Isn't it wonderful? Something marvelous is happening to me now. That's it. No complex visualization, no detailed scenes, no trying to picture specific outcomes. Just those words, spoken inwardly with genuine feeling as she drifted towards sleep. But here's what made all the difference. She didn't say these words like most. People repeat affirmations. She didn't mumble them mechanically while her mind wandered elsewhere. She didn't recite them with the hollow tone of someone who doesn't really believe what they're saying. Instead, she let herself actually feel what those words meant. She allowed herself to experience the joy, the delight, the surprise, the profound gratitude that would wash over her if she had just received the most wonderful news imaginable. This is the distinction that separates those who transform their lives from those who merely go through the motions. The words themselves carry no power. They're just sounds, just syllables. The power lives entirely in the feeling behind them. When she said, "Isn't it wonderful?" she genuinely felt wonderful. She let herself experience that bubbling up of joy that happens when something unexpectedly marvelous enters your life. She didn't know what the marvelous thing was. She didn't define it or limit it or try to control its form. She simply opened herself to the feeling of having received something that exceeded her hopes, something that solved everything, something that made her want to laugh with relief and gratitude. Each night for 2 months, she practiced this. Just 30 seconds or so before sleep, she would enter that drowsy threshold state and feel with all her heart this sense of something wonderful happening to her right now. Not in the future, not someday when her circumstances improved, but now, in this very moment. During the day, her situation remained difficult. The bills kept arriving. The car continued to deteriorate. Nothing visible changed. But each night she planted her seed with absolute emotional authenticity, and each morning she woke with a strange sense of expectancy, as if something good were about to break through into her reality. The impact of this simple practice demonstrates something profound about how consciousness works. You don't need to know the details of what you're manifesting. You don't need to micromanage every aspect of how your good will arrive. Sometimes the most powerful approach is to surrender the specifics and focus entirely on the feeling quality of the outcome. When she stopped trying to control exactly what would manifest and simply opened herself to feeling wonderful about something wonderful happening, she removed all the limitations her conscious mind had been placing on the infinite intelligence of her subconscious. She was no longer saying, "It must come this way or that way." She was saying, "I trust that something marvelous is unfolding, and I feel it now." The authenticity of her emotion was everything. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't faking it until she made it. She was genuinely allowing herself to feel good, to feel blessed, to feel as if grace had already touched her life. This emotional authenticity is what activates the law. The subconscious responds not to what you think, but to what you genuinely feel. And when you can genuinely feel wonderful about your life even before the evidence appears, you're operating at the level where transformation actually originates. Now let me show you what happened next, because this is where the invisible machinery of manifestation becomes visible, where consciousness translates into concrete circumstances through channels no one could have predicted. Right, something wonderful is happening now if you're ready to embrace this level of trust. For 2 full months, this woman maintained her practice with unwavering consistency. Think about what that actually means. Every single night, regardless of how her day went, regardless of whether her circumstances showed any sign of improvement, she returned to that drowsy pre-sleep state and planted her seed. There were nights when the day had been particularly difficult, when new bills arrived, or when her car made another concerning noise, or when the landlord sent another warning. On those nights, it would have been so easy to drift, off to sleep, consumed by worry, to let the anxiety of her situation fill those precious moments before unconsciousness. But she didn't. She chose differently. She chose to feel wonderful. She chose to assume that something marvelous was happening to her now, even when every piece of visible evidence contradicted that assumption. This is the journey that most people never complete. They try a technique for a few days, maybe a week, and when nothing visible changes, they abandon it. They decide it doesn't work. They return to their old patterns of worry and doubt. But transformation requires consistency, especially in the beginning when you're establishing a new pattern of consciousness. The old habits are deeply grooved. They've been running automatically for years, perhaps decades. Creating a new groove, a new pattern, requires repetition. Not mindless repetition, but consistent return to the feeling state you want to establish as your new normal. Each night she practiced, she was deepening the impression, making it more real, more natural, more established in her subconscious. Then one day, something happened that seemed completely insignificant at the time. She ran into an old acquaintance on the street, someone she hadn't seen in months. They exchanged casual pleasantries, the kind of surface conversation people have when they bump into each other unexpectedly. He mentioned that he was about to travel to New York for business. They chatted briefly about the city, about his plans, nothing particularly meaningful or memorable. Then they parted ways. She forgot the conversation almost immediately. It meant nothing to her. It seemed like just another random encounter, the kind that happens all the time in daily life without any significance attached to it. But here's what she didn't realize in that moment. The machinery of manifestation was already in motion. The law was already working behind the scenes, orchestrating events through channels she couldn't perceive. That casual conversation, that seemingly meaningless mention of a New York business trip, was actually the first visible thread of something much larger beginning to weave itself into her reality. This is how manifestation typically works in practice. It doesn't usually announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It begins quietly, subtly, through circumstances that appear random and insignificant. A chance encounter, a casual conversation, someone mentioning something in passing. These are often the seeds that grow into the full harvest of your manifestation. Most people miss these early signals because they're looking for something dramatic, something that obviously matches what they've been imagining. But the law works through natural channels, through the ordinary flow of life, through what appears to be coincidence, but is actually consciousness creating connection. The impact of that brief street conversation would only become clear later when the full picture revealed itself. For now, it was just a moment she forgot, a detail that seemed irrelevant, a piece of a puzzle she didn't yet know was being assembled specifically for her benefit. Drop "I trust the small beginnings" in the comments if you're seeing how manifestation unfolds naturally. 1 month after that forgotten street conversation, the acquaintance appeared at her door. She was shocked to see him standing there, but what he was holding in his hands shocked her even more. It was an envelope, and inside that envelope was a certified check for $2,500 made out in her name. She stood there speechless, unable to process what she was seeing. How could this be? Where did this come from? The story he told her seemed like something from a dream, something too improbable to be real. It concerned a friend from her distant past, someone she hadn't seen or heard from in more than 25 years. This friend, she now learned, had become extremely wealthy in those intervening years. The connection happened through the most unlikely chain of events. During that business trip to New York, the acquaintance had run into this old friend of hers purely by accident. They had started talking, catching up on their lives, and somehow, in the course of that casual conversation, her name had come up. The wealthy friend remembered her fondly from decades ago and asked how she was doing. The acquaintance mentioned, without knowing the depth of her struggles, that times had been difficult for her. And in that moment, moved by something he couldn't fully explain, the wealthy friend made a decision. He wanted to help. He wanted to share a portion of his fortune with her, not as a loan, not with any expectation of repayment or anything in return. He simply wanted to give, to bless someone from his past who he remembered with warmth. This is the invisible architecture of consciousness at work. The woman had no way of orchestrating this. She didn't know her old friend had become wealthy. She didn't know he would be in New York at the same time as her acquaintance. She didn't know they would run into each other, or that her name would come up in conversation. The conscious mind could never have planned this sequence of events. But her subconscious, connected to the larger consciousness that links all minds, knew exactly how to arrange circumstances to match her assumption that something wonderful was happening. The feeling she had cultivated every night before. Sleep created ripples that moved through the invisible web of reality, touching people, inspiring decisions, creating connections across time and space. But the transformation didn't stop with that initial check. For the next 2 years, she received monthly checks from this friend's attorney, generous checks that more than covered her needs and left plenty over for the beautiful things of life. The car got fixed. The rent got paid with money left over. New clothes appeared in her closet. The constant anxiety that had been her companion for so long dissolved into peace. And then, 2 years into this monthly blessing, legal papers arrived that took her breath away. These documents established that this monthly income would continue for the rest of her natural life. Not for a year, not for a few years, but for as long as she lived. Complete financial security, permanent abundance, lifetime support, all from 30 seconds of "Isn't it wonderful?" before sleep each night. The impact of this story goes far beyond just one woman's transformation. It reveals the actual mechanics of how consciousness creates reality, how feeling shapes form, how assumption becomes fact. She didn't need to know how it would happen. She didn't need to visualize the specific details. She just needed to feel wonderful about something wonderful happening, and the universe arranged everything else. Type, "My consciousness creates miracles," if this is showing you what's truly possible when you align with the law. Now let me share with you a story that reveals something profound about how this law works and why sometimes adults make it far more complicated than it needs to be. One afternoon, a grandmother brought her young grandson to one of Joseph Murphy's lectures in New York. The boy was 9 years old, and he sat quietly in his chair with a small toy truck, apparently absorbed in his play while Murphy spoke to the adults about consciousness and manifestation. The grandmother had come with her own questions, practical concerns about her business and her life, seeking guidance from someone who understood these principles. She had no idea that her grandson was absorbing every word, that his young mind was grasping truths that most adults struggle with for years. Murphy explained to the grandmother how the law of assumption works, how whatever state you assume with feeling must inevitably express itself in your external world. He shared stories of transformation, stories like the ones you've been hearing today, demonstrating that consciousness creates circumstances. The grandmother listened intently, nodding, trying to understand how to apply these ideas to her complex adult life. But the boy, playing with his truck, was understanding it at a level that went beyond intellectual comprehension. Children haven't yet learned to doubt their imagination. They haven't yet been taught that certain things are impossible. They haven't yet built the thick walls of skepticism and rationalization that adults use to protect themselves from disappointment. When the grandmother and the boy rose to leave, something extraordinary happened. The boy looked up at Murphy with shining eyes, filled with excitement and absolute certainty. He said, "I know what I want, and now I know how to get it." Murphy was surprised. He had been speaking to adults about adult matters, not thinking the boy was even paying attention. He asked the boy what he wanted. The child's answer was immediate and clear. "I want a puppy." The grandmother's face changed instantly. She turned to Murphy with apologetic embarrassment and began explaining why this was completely impossible. The boy's parents had absolutely forbidden a dog. They had made it crystal clear many times. His father, in particular, hated dogs, could not stand them. There was no possibility, none whatsoever, that this boy would ever have a dog in that household. But the boy was completely undeterred. He said, with the kind of conviction that only children possess, "Every night as I'm going off to sleep, I'm going to pretend that I have a dog and we're going for a walk." The grandmother shook her head vigorously. She tried to explain that he had misunderstood, that this teaching wasn't meant for him, that his situation was different. But Murphy saw something in the boy's eyes that the grandmother couldn't see. He saw understanding. Not intellectual understanding, but the deep knowing that comes before thought, before doubt, before all the complications that adults layer onto simple truth. The boy understood at the level of feeling, at the level where the law actually operates. This is the hidden advantage children have in working with consciousness. They don't question whether it will work. They don't worry about how it will happen. They don't analyze whether the circumstances make it likely or unlikely. They simply decide what they want, feel it as real, and trust that feeling completely. The journey from desire to manifestation is short for them, because they don't create obstacles with their thinking. They haven't yet learned all the reasons why something can't happen. Comment, childlike faith, if you're ready to approach this with the simplicity and trust of a child. So the boy did exactly what he said he would do. Every single night, as he drifted towards sleep, he imagined himself walking with his dog, not someday in the distant future, but now, in present tense reality. He felt the leash in his hand, the gentle tug of his companion beside him, the warmth of the dog's presence. He felt the joy of having exactly what he wanted, the simple happiness of a boy and his best friend taking a walk together. He didn't complicate it. He didn't wonder if his father would change his mind or how his parents might be convinced. He didn't analyze the obstacles or calculate the probabilities. He just felt the feeling of having his dog, night after night, with complete naturalness and ease. This is the purity of practice that adults so often lose. The boy wasn't trying to make something happen. He wasn't forcing or pushing or manipulating. He was simply living in his imagination with such vividness and joy that it felt more real than his current circumstances. And because he had no doubt, no resistance, no complicated beliefs about what was possible or impossible, his assumption went straight into his subconscious without interference. Pure feeling, pure assumption, pure creative power, flowing unobstructed. Approximately 6 weeks later, something happened that stunned the entire family. The father, the man who hated dogs, who had made his position absolutely clear countless times, came home from work one evening with something in his arms, a puppy. The family stood there in shock, unable to believe what they were seeing. The grandmother, when she later wrote to Murphy about this, said she could barely comprehend it. This was the same man who had firmly, repeatedly, categorically refused to allow a dog in the house under any circumstances, and yet here he was, holding a puppy, looking somewhat dazed himself, as if he couldn't quite understand his own behavior. The story behind this transformation reveals the invisible mechanics of consciousness at work. A business associate's dog had given birth to a litter of puppies. That day at work, something had come over the father. He couldn't explain it fully, but before he knew what he was doing, before his rational mind could intervene with all its objections and reasons, he had picked up one of the puppies and decided to bring it home to his son. The decision felt spontaneous, natural, like it was his own idea arising from his own heart. But what was really happening? The boy's consistent assumption, his nightly feeling of having his dog, had created ripples in consciousness that reached his father's mind and moved him to take action that contradicted his stated beliefs and preferences. This is the hidden, Truth about how manifestation actually works in the real world. The boy didn't need to convince his father. He didn't need to negotiate or plead or create elaborate arguments. He simply held the assumption so purely that reality had to rearrange itself to match. The father experienced what felt like his own spontaneous change of heart, but it was actually consciousness responding to the law. The outer world mirroring an inner shift created by a 9-year-old's simple bedtime practice. The impact of this story goes beyond just a boy getting his puppy. It demonstrates that the obstacles we think are insurmountable, the people we think will never change, the circumstances we think are fixed, all of these are far more fluid than we imagine when consciousness shifts at the level where creation actually happens. The grandmother was astounded. The mother was shocked. But the boy, he wasn't surprised at all. He knew exactly what had happened because he understood the law in the uncomplicated way that only children can. Right, simple faith, powerful results if you're seeing how purity of practice creates breakthrough. Now let me show you something that will completely transform how you understand yourself and your relationship to money, to abundance, to everything you've been trying to manifest. Most people live their entire lives believing they are a body that somehow possesses consciousness, as if awareness is something that happened to you, something your brain produces. But this is backwards. You are not a body that has consciousness. You are consciousness itself, wearing a body for a time as a vehicle to experience physical reality. Your body is the house, not the one who lives inside. It's the car, not the driver. And this distinction changes everything because it means the real you, the essential you, is not limited by physical circumstances at all. When you close your eyes right now and sense your own existence, that feeling of being aware, that sense of I am, that knows you exist, this is not produced by your body. This is what you actually are. This consciousness, this awareness of being, is what the ancient scriptures were pointing to when they spoke of the divine within. Not some distant God in the sky judging you from afar, but the very power of creation expressing itself as your own sense of existence. Every time scripture says I am, it's speaking about this awareness you're experiencing right now as you listen to these words. This is the creative force that shapes reality, and it's not separate from you. It is you. Before you add any description to yourself, before you say I am poor, or I am struggling, or I am successful, or I am wealthy, there exists pure I am. Just awareness, just being, just existence without any qualifications or limitations. This unconditioned consciousness is pure potential, infinite creative power with no boundaries, no restrictions, no lack of any kind. It's like pure white light before it gets filtered through colored glass. It contains all possibilities, all states, all experiences. Nothing is impossible to it because it hasn't yet been conditioned into any particular form. But then you add descriptions. You say, I am poor. And in that moment, you're taking this unlimited creative power and marrying it to a limiting state. You're conditioning pure consciousness with the concept of poverty, and that marriage produces your experience. You say, I am struggling, and you wed infinite potential to limitation, and your reality reflects that union. This is the hidden mechanism behind everything you experience. Whatever you attach to I am becomes your lived reality because you're directing the creative force of consciousness itself into that specific channel. The power doesn't diminish, it's always infinite, but you're shaping how it expresses through you. Most people walk around unconsciously conditioning their I am all day long. I am tired. I am broke. I am stuck. I am unlucky. Each statement is an act of creation, directing pure consciousness into limited forms, and then they wonder why their life feels limited. But the revelation that transforms everything is understanding that you can consciously choose what you wed to I am. You can direct this creative power deliberately instead of accidentally. When you say and feel I am abundant, you're taking that same infinite consciousness and channeling it into abundance. When you say and feel I am blessed, you're directing creative power into blessing. The journey from lack to abundance isn't about acquiring something external. It's about changing what you're marrying to your consciousness, changing how you're conditioning your I am. This is why affirmations work when they're done with genuine feeling, because you're literally redirecting the creative force of consciousness itself into new forms. Type, I am unlimited consciousness, if this understanding is shifting something fundamental in how you see yourself. Now here's the missing piece that explains why some people can say all the right words, visualize perfectly, and still see no results. Your subconscious mind doesn't respond to words. It doesn't care what you think in an intellectual sense. It responds exclusively to feeling, to the emotional tone that accompanies your thoughts. This is the secret that Joseph Murphy discovered and taught relentlessly. Feeling is the creative agent that activates everything. You can repeat, I am wealthy 10,000 times, but if you feel poor while saying it, poverty is what you're actually creating. The words are just noise. The feeling is the instruction your subconscious receives and faithfully executes. This is why people fail with affirmations and visualization. They're doing the techniques mechanically, going through the motions, without the emotional conviction that makes those techniques work. They say the words but feel the opposite. They visualize abundance, but their gut churns with lack. And the subconscious, always faithful, always obedient, creates reality according to the feeling, not the words. The transformation happens when you learn to generate genuine feeling, when you let yourself actually experience the emotional state of having what you desire even before the evidence appears. That's when everything shifts, because that's when you're finally giving your subconscious clear, unambiguous instructions. But here's something most people never realize. You're not just planting seeds during your 30-second practice before sleep. You're planting seeds all day long through your inner speech. Right now, even as you listen to this, there's probably a conversation happening in your mind, a running commentary, a mental dialogue that never quite stops. For most people, this inner speech runs completely automatically, like background music they've stopped noticing. But this constant mental chatter is not harmless. It's the continuous sowing of seeds, and what you're planting with your inner speech throughout the day either reinforces or undermines what you're trying to create with your nighttime practice. Pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. When you see something expensive, what's your automatic inner response? If it's, I can't afford that, or that's not for people like me, you're planting seeds of lack. When you think about your financial future, what's the narrative running through your mind? If it's, I'll never get ahead, or money always slips through my fingers, you're programming tomorrow's struggle today. These aren't just passing thoughts. They're creative acts, instructions being downloaded into your subconscious continuously, shaping the reality you'll experience next week, next month, next year. This means you need to go on what Murphy called a mental diet. Just as you wouldn't eat poison and expect to be healthy, you cannot think poison and expect prosperity. When you catch yourself in negative, inner conversation, and you will catch yourself many times because the habit is deep, simply stop. Don't criticize yourself. Don't feel guilty. Just stop and redirect. Replace the thought of lack with a thought of abundance. Instead of, I can't afford that, say inwardly with feeling, everything I need comes to me easily. Instead of money is so tight, say money flows to me from expected and unexpected sources. The key is saying it with genuine feeling, meaning it, letting yourself believe it even for a moment. And here's the revelation that ties everything together. Everyone you encounter is reflecting your own consciousness back to you. If you assume people are helpful and generous, you will encounter helpful and generous people. If you assume the world is against you, you'll find opposition everywhere. This principle explains why, when your internal assumptions about wealth change, suddenly opportunities appear, people become more supportive, circumstances shift in your favor. You're not changing them. You're changing yourself, and they're reflecting that change back to you like mirrors. Comment, "My inner world creates my outer world," if you're ready to take responsibility for what you're creating. So here we are, at the end of this journey together, and if you've stayed with me through all of this, I want you to know something. That's not an accident. You were meant to hear this message at this exact moment in your life. The fact that you're still here, that you've absorbed these principles, that you've seen how consciousness creates reality through the stories of real people who transformed their lives. This tells me you're ready. You're ready to stop fighting against circumstances and start working with the law that governs all creation. Now, if this resonated with you, if something shifted inside as you listened, do me a favor and subscribe to this channel. I'm here creating content like this because I believe these principles can transform lives, and I want to make sure you don't miss the deeper explorations we're going to do together. There's so much more to uncover about how consciousness works, how to apply these techniques in specific situations, how to overcome the obstacles that arise on this path. I want you with me for that journey. And before you go, leave a comment down below saying, "This message was meant for me, so I know you made it all the way through." I read every comment, and there's something powerful about declaring your readiness, about putting it into words. It's a small act, but it's also a statement to yourself and to the universe that you're stepping into this understanding with intention. If you found value in what we explored today, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who need to hear it, people who are searching for answers just like you were before you clicked on this video. Your simple action creates ripples that touch lives you'll never meet. And listen, there's another video right here that goes even deeper into how to apply these principles when you're facing specific challenges. It complements everything we just covered, and I think you're going to find it incredibly useful. Click on it and continue with me there. Let's keep this transformation moving forward together. I'll see you in the next one.